A timeless Hollywood icon, Meryl Streep, took the stage on Jimmy Kimmel Live to promote her latest work. But what began as a routine interview quickly escalated into a fiery confrontation, resulting in her being escorted out of the studio. It was a story full of surprises and chaos, a moment that will be remembered forever in the entertainment world. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was ablaze with energy and the excited cheers of the audience. Jimmy Kimmel, with his enthusiastic demeanor and familiar smile, his voice echoing through the room, full of excitement, like a conductor preparing for a virtuoso's solo. Please welcome an immortal monument of cinema, the woman with the most prestigious awards, who has shaped generations of acting, a living legend, Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep stepped out, unhurried but regal. She scanned the cheering crowd, offering Jimmy a gentle, polite smile. She sat down in the chair across from Jimmy, her demeanor steady and composed. Jimmy quickly launched into his first question, his tone overly familiar. "Meryl, it's wonderful to have you here. How does it feel to be back in our studio?" She gave a slight smile, her gaze lingering on Jimmy's face. "It feels vibrant," Jimmy Meryl replied, her voice warm and resonant, starkly different from Jimmy's animated tone. She didn't laugh heartily, only slightly curling her lips, just enough to remain polite but also to create a subtle distance. Her eyes briefly swept the studio, taking in everything. She said no more, leaving a brief silence that forced Jimmy to quickly pivot to the next topic. "Fantastic. Let's talk about your new film, The Final Painting. A mysterious and promising title," Jimmy said enthusiastically, shifting gears. "Can you share what drew you to this project? I hear it's a deeply profound story about loss and the search for core values in modern life." He tried to sound knowledgeable, but his tone was rushed, as if reading a quick summary. Meryl nodded slightly, her eyes deepening when speaking about her work. He spoke of reflecting on what we truly value, about delving into the human soul, each word infused with experience and understanding. But Jimmy, instead of following that emotional thread, sought to shift to cracks and scars with a humorous clip. The screen suddenly lit up, displaying crudely edited iconic scenes of Meryl, overlaid with silly music and exaggerated effects, turning them into mindless memes. The audience burst into laughter, but on Meryl's face, the smile completely vanished. Her gaze turned icy, piercing Jimmy, not with anger, but with sharp, biting irony. "Very interesting, Jimmy," she said, her voice warm but razor-sharp. "Those moments, they belong to stories, to characters built with heart and serious effort." She emphasized that the audience was discerning enough to distinguish between artistic value and fleeting entertainment stunts. Meryl leaned forward slightly, her elegant hands clasped, decisively steering the conversation back to its core. "We're here to talk about The Final Painting. I came to share about the creative journey, the meaning we want to convey, not to revisit old laughs or turn lifelong roles into meaningless viral clips." Jimmy's forced smile and pleading glance toward the wings showed he had completely lost control in the face of a legend's resolve and dignity. Jimmy cleared his throat, trying to regain confidence. He picked up another card, his eyes scanning it hurriedly. "Great, Meryl," he began, his voice still attempting to sound natural but tinged with awkwardness. "Talking about what's truly important. As you said, there's been a little rumor lately about you reuniting with, well, I won't name names, but is it an old flame for some project? Our audience is really curious about your personal life." He flashed a suggestive smile, as if sharing an intriguing secret with the audience. The smile on Meryl's lips vanished entirely. Her gaze locked onto Jimmy, no longer polite but radiating an indescribable coldness. He remained silent for a few seconds, a silence that seemed to stretch endlessly, making the studio air thick with tension. "Jimmy," Meryl finally spoke, her voice low, clear, each word sharp and weighty. "I believe I've always given my all to my work, to my art. My personal life, like anyone else's, is a private space. It's not a performance for entertainment, not a topic for gossip on live television." She tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving Jimmy. "I'm here as an actor, a filmmaker, to share about a work we've poured our hearts into. I'm not here to be a spectacle for trivial stories, or to perform in the way you want. Jimmy Kimmel, though slightly flustered, tried to push the script forward. Come on, Meryl, this is just an entertainment show. The audience loves you for your talent, and they're also curious about the real you. We just want to bring fun, authentic moments. He tried to defuse the situation by invoking the fans, but his words sounded insincere. Meryl shook her head slightly, a small gesture carrying the weight of disappointment. Jimmy? I believe our audience is smart enough to see the difference between meaningful entertainment and cheap gimmicks. I can't sit here and turn my personal experiences into jokes or let the stories I hold sacred be twisted for ratings. Respect for art, and the audience doesn't allow me to do that. She paused, her gaze sweeping the crowd, then back to Jimmy. We're in a space where many people are listening. We have a responsibility to present what's meaningful, what brings real value, not just easy laughs or pointless gossip. The studio atmosphere grew heavy. The audience's laughter had stopped, replaced by murmurs and whispers. Some began nodding in agreement with Meryl, their eyes looking at Jimmy with skepticism. Jimmy, feeling the mounting pressure, decided to play his final card, a stunt he believed no one could resist. All right, Meryl, he said, trying to muster fake enthusiasm. Maybe we should get back to your talent. The audience at home, and here knows you're a master of every tone, every emotion. I have a little challenge for you, something to show off Meryl Streep's transformative genius. Could you perform a famous line from Sophie's Choice, but in the voice of, say, a cartoon character like Minnie Mouse or a goofy penguin? He flashed a wide grin, eyes twinkling with anticipation. Jimmy's smile quickly faded. Meryl's expression didn't change. Her face remained calm, but her eyes carried a terrifying severity. Meryl slowly placed her hands on her knees, unmoving. Jimmy, she said, her voice lowering but resonating through every corner of the studio. Do you know why Sophie's Choice is an important film? Because it speaks of pain, sacrifice, and unimaginable human choices at the edge of life and death. It's not a joke, not a challenge to be performed in a silly cartoon voice. She looked straight at Jimmy, unwavering, turning a film scene, an emotion, a story that touched millions of hearts into cheap entertainment. That's not how I view art. That's not how I respect the work. And it's certainly not how I respect the audience. After Meryl's resolute declaration, the studio fell into a chilling silence, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and Jimmy Kimmel's heavy breathing. His eyes were fixed on Meryl Streep, confusion and panic clear on his face. He tried to say something, but his throat seemed to catch. He glanced desperately at the director in the wings, pleading for help. The director and producers were also in a bind, signaling frantically to each other, but no one dared act. Live ratings were soaring, but the on-air tension was a double-edged sword. Meryl didn't wait for Jimmy to recover or steer the conversation. She took control, her voice clear and firm, each word a manifesto. I've spent my life pursuing the beauty of art, seeking truth in every role, every story. When I stand on a stage or in front of a camera, I believe it's a privilege, a responsibility to tell meaningful stories, to touch human hearts, to make audiences reflect, feel, and even change. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze sweeping the audience, as if speaking directly to each person. But it seems in this era, there's a troubling trend. Everything must be entertaining. Everything must go viral. Everything must generate laughs, numbers, clicks and views, without regard for depth or true value. Art is being turned into a cheap commodity, consumed quickly and discarded, like a bag of potato chips. Jimmy tried to interrupt, clearing his throat and raising his microphone. Meryl, I think, maybe we're straying a bit from the original topic. Straying from the topic. Meryl cut in immediately, her voice not louder but full of authority, making Jimmy swallow hard. Dear Jimmy, this is the topic. This is the core of every issue. When will we stop calling nonsense entertainment? When will we stop turning life's sacred things, pain, joy, meaningful choices, into funny clips to satisfy fleeting curiosity? She continued, her voice growing stronger, each word like an arrow piercing the conscience of listeners. Art is not a joke. Acting is not a circus. I'm not a puppet for you to pull strings to make people laugh. I believe my audience, and yours, deserves more. They deserve respect. They deserve to be treated as people with intelligence and emotions, not as easy targets to be amused with ridiculous stunts. The studio audience began reacting clearly. First came murmurs, then gasps of awe, and finally scattered applause that grew louder and spread. They weren't just clapping for Meryl, but for themselves, for the value they believed they deserved. Some stood, showing their agreement. Jimmy Kimmel saw the audience's reaction, and his face grew paler. He signaled frantically to the wings, muttering under his breath. The producers and director in the control room were in a panic. They were caught between maintaining soaring ratings and managing a Meryl Streep, who was on fire, unbound by any script. An assistant rushed to whisper to Jimmy, but was brusquely waved off. Meryl paid no mind to the chaos in the wings, or Jimmy's discomfort. She continued, her gaze distant, as if addressing the world. I remember when we talked about films like Kramer versus Kramer, Out of Africa, or Sophie's Choice. We didn't just discuss acting or directing. We talked about social issues, love, loss, and the difficult choices humans face. Those films taught us something about ourselves, about the world. That's the power of true art. She turned back to Jimmy, her eyes challenging yet tinged with deep sadness. But now, do we still dare to talk about those things? Or do we only want moments to clip, post on social media, and forget? I believe people need more. They need stories, performances they can carry in their hearts and minds, not just a fleeting laugh. Meryl Streep's words echoed through the studio, not only reaching the audience, but serving as a wake-up call for media makers, accustomed to prioritizing profit over core values. Jimmy Kimmel sat there, utterly powerless. He had lost all control. Meryl Streep was no longer just a guest. She had become a teacher, an orator delivering a lesson neither he nor the world would ever forget. Meryl continued, her voice softer but still powerful, like a rushing yet serene river. I've seen this industry change so much, from films made with heart, aiming to touch the deepest layers of human emotion, to products created just to fit algorithms and trends. We're losing the soul of art when we chase numbers. A great painting isn't judged by how many people see it, but by the emotions it evokes, the thoughts it leaves behind. She looked directly into the main camera, as if speaking to millions watching at home. Art reflects life. It should be a mirror for us to see ourselves, to understand the world around us. It's not an empty entertainment box to be discarded after its commercial value is drained. That's why I stand here today, not to superficially promote myself or my film, but to remind us all of the true value of what we create and what we consume. Jimmy Kimmel, though still flustered and seemingly angry, couldn't interrupt Meryl's words. Her eloquence was too compelling, and the audience embraced it fervently. The applause grew louder, drowning out the initial murmurs. Meryl Streep wasn't just speaking, she was inspiring. She was awakening a part of the audience, lulled by shallow, meaningless entertainment. We have a responsibility, Meryl emphasized, her voice ringing like a vow, the responsibility of artists, to preserve the purity of art, the responsibility of audiences, to demand more, to reject the mediocre, and embrace what has value. She took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering. I believe in the power of stories, the power of a truthful performance, the power of a message delivered from heart to heart. That's what endures, what makes us human. The silence in the studio was no longer tense, but reverent. Jimmy Kimmel could only sit there, his eyes darting from the soaring ratings display to Meryl Streep's stern face. He, along with the entire production team, faced an unprecedented situation. Meryl Streep had turned an ordinary talk show into a forum, a public reckoning of professional ethics and the value of entertainment. She was no longer a guest, but a standard bearer, a leader of thought. Jimmy Kimmel, though trying to hide his unease, couldn't maintain his usual confidence. He cleared his throat, attempting to regain control, but his voice sounded hoarse, weaker. Meryl, I hear what you're saying, But you know we just want to bring joy to the audience. This is an entertainment show. People come here to relax, to laugh, to forget their daily worries. He tried to justify his earlier disrespect with the excuse of entertainment. Meryl Streep didn't yield. Her gaze was cold, sharp as a blade. She looked straight at Jimmy, her expression unwavering. "Jimmy," she said, her voice not loud, but resolute, each word like a nail driven home. "Joy doesn't mean shallowness. Relaxation doesn't mean meaninglessness. And true entertainment, as I see it, is when both creator and audience are respected. Not when one is turned into a clown, for the other's amusement." She paused, letting her words sink in. When you turn serious art, a life of dedication, into a series of cheap edited moments, when you ask an actor to perform ridiculous stunts for laughs, that's not bringing joy. That's devaluing. Jimmy felt cornered. His eyes betrayed anger and frustration at failing to manipulate Meryl. He glanced at another card, trying to shift tactics, his tone sharper, tinged with defiance. "Miss Streep, it seems you're taking this too seriously. This is live TV, a talk show. Our purpose is entertainment. You can't just stand here and lecture all of Hollywood about ethics." He tried to diminish her role, painting her as overly rigid, out of touch. Meryl gave a faint smile, not humorous, but laced with polite disdain. "Lecture," she repeated Jimmy's word. "No, Jimmy, I'm not lecturing. I'm speaking about truth. I'm speaking about respect, and I'm speaking about responsibility. The responsibility of those with a voice, with influence, to elevate value, not diminish it." She slowly placed her hand on the armrest, a small gesture carrying immense weight. The audience in the studio held their breath. Jimmy Kimmel stared at her, sensing something was about to happen. Meryl Streep began to stand. The entire studio seemed to freeze. Her movements were deliberate, regal, like a goddess rising to deliver judgment. Every gesture exuded dignity and unyielding resolve. Jimmy Kimmel tried to stand with her, but his legs seemed to wobble, managing only an awkward half-rise. "And I will not let anyone turn that stage into a circus." Meryl continued, her voice still calm, but resonating through the room, each word like a final oath. She looked directly at Jimmy Kimmel, her gaze unflinching. "I came here in good faith, with the desire to share about a work I believe is meaningful, but you chose to turn it into cheap entertainment. You chose to diminish the value of art, the value of the audience, and the value of yourself." She slightly curled her lips, a sad but resolute smile. "I've said what needed to be said. I've done what needed to be done, and I will not play this game any longer." With those words, Meryl turned decisively. She didn't look back at Jimmy or the stunned audience. She began walking, each step steady and confident, straight toward the wings. The studio erupted. Shouts, cheers, and thunderous applause intertwined chaotically. Half the audience leapt to their feet, clapping fervently, chanting Meryl Streep's name. They had witnessed a legend stand up for core values. The other half remained stunned, some whispering, others looking at Jimmy Kimmel with confusion and faint disappointment. Chaos engulfed the studio. Jimmy Kimmel stood there, still clutching the microphone, his face pale, utterly powerless and dazed. He had lost control of the show, lost the respect of a significant portion of the audience, and most importantly, lost the basic courtesy he should have shown an icon like Meryl Streep. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of this collapse. Meryl Streep strode toward the wings, the fervent applause from half the audience echoing behind her. Each step radiated determination, without a trace of hesitation or regret. She didn't look back, unconcerned by the chaos her words and actions had unleashed. For her, this moment wasn't a performance or a fleeting emotional outburst. It was a statement. Jimmy Kimmel remained frozen on stage, the microphone in his hand, suddenly feeling heavy. His smile had vanished entirely, replaced by a pale, disoriented expression. He stared toward the wings where Meryl had disappeared, then turned to the audience. The murmurs, whispers, and unexpected applause from the crowd left him even more rattled. He tried to say something into the microphone, but only faint, incoherent sounds came out. Control had slipped from his grasp entirely. From the control room, producers and directors were shouting, "Cut to commercial! Cut to commercial!" Now. The commands crackled urgently through the intercom. But Jimmy in that moment seemed to hear nothing. He was frozen by embarrassment and fear of the consequences. The cameras kept zooming in on his face, capturing every second of his disorientation. Meryl Streep, meanwhile, entered the backstage area. No crowd noise, just dim lights, and the hurried movements of a few crew members trying to avoid her. A young assistant, face pale, rushed toward her. "Miss Streep, you can't, the show is still live. We need to." Meryl raised her hand. A simple but commanding gesture, cutting the assistant off. "I've said what needed to be said," she replied, her voice calm but carrying the weight of an iceberg. "I'm not here to be part of that cheap circus. My responsibility is to art, to truth, not to ratings or meaningless laughs." She didn't need to shout or show anger. Her composure only amplified the authenticity and gravity of her words. The height assistant swallowed hard, unable to meet Meryl's gaze directly. She knew, even without Meryl's legendary status, her dignity and integrity were enough to overpower anyone. But the contract, Miss Streep and Jimmy. He contract. Meryl's lips curled slightly, a fleeting smile laced with contempt. "I don't sell my soul for a few words on paper. My contract is with the audience, with the stories I've dedicated my life to telling. And when that contract is broken by mediocrity, I have the right to walk away." Her words were clear, leaving no room for argument. At that moment, a senior producer, face flushed with anger and extreme worry, rushed forward. "Meryl, what are you doing? This is career suicide. Do you know how this will affect your new film?" He tried to grab her arm, but Meryl subtly stepped aside, evading him. "Suicide?" Meryl turned, her gaze piercing him without a hint of fear. "No, sir. What's destroying this industry is complacency. Prioritizing profit over all values. Turning art into trashy entertainment. I'm not destroying anything. I'm protecting what's left. I'm protecting the soul of cinema. Something you've long forgotten." She took a deep breath, head held high. "My film, The Final Painting, is a work made with heart. Those who truly care about art, who seek meaning, will find it. It doesn't need cheap gimmicks or ridiculous TV stunts." Suddenly, the show's theme music blared from the studio, signaling the end of the commercial break and the imminent return to live broadcast. This meant the cameras would resume, and Meryl Streep's absence would create a glaring void on air. The producer was nearly frantic. "Miss Meryl, you have to go back, at least to say goodbye to the audience." We'll talk later." Meryl Streep only smiled faintly, a mysterious smile. "No need," she replied. "My goodbye has been delivered. The audience heard it, and I believe they'll understand." Without another word, she continued walking, disappearing completely into the dark hallway behind the wings. Her elegant yet resolute figure faded, leaving behind a struggling Jimmy Kimmel on live TV, and a chaotic production team scrambling to salvage the situation. Meryl Streep's departure wasn't just the end of an interview. It was the start of a debate. It was a public challenge, a wake-up call for an industry lost in the maze of complacency and profit. Her exit was a powerful act, proof that true fame and talent don't need to bow to mediocrity. She left, but her message lingered, stronger than ever, seeping into the minds of millions watching, forcing them to rethink the true meaning of entertainment and art. Immediately, the producers and Jimmy Kimmel's phones buzzed incessantly. Early reports from the social media team showed an unprecedented ferocious wave of reactions sweeping across platforms. That night, Meryl Streep on Jimmy Kimmel quickly became the top trending topic on X, Facebook and Instagram. Unlike typical scandals, the public's response wasn't entirely critical of Meryl. Instead, it split into two clear camps. One side, mainly loyal Meryl fans and art critics, praised her actions as courageous, principled, and a necessary statement. They lauded her for standing against the trivialization of art and invasions of privacy. Finally, someone dared to speak the truth. A comment on X read, garnering tens of thousands of likes. A veteran film critic posted, "Meryl Streep didn't just walk off a show, she walked away from an industry devaluing itself. She's a beacon of hope for true art." However, the other side, including some entertainment consumers and Jimmy Kimmel supporters, criticized Meryl as arrogant, overly serious and disrespectful to the host. They argued she ruined an interview and showed unprofessionalism. "It's just entertainment, Meryl. Don't act like a saint," an Instagram user commented. The network behind Jimmy Kimmel Live initially tried to downplay the incident, calling it a minor misunderstanding, and stating Meryl Streep remains a great friend of the show, but the controversy only grew. Major outlets, from the New York Times to the Hollywood Reporter, dedicated front pages to analyzing the event. Other talk shows quickly jumped on the topic, sparking varied opinions. Some celebrities also spoke out, fueling a lively debate about the nature of modern entertainment. The most surprising shift was in public sentiment. Initially, the debate seemed to center on who was right or wrong, but gradually, Meryl Streep's message about true art and audience respect began to resonate. Clips from the interview went viral, especially her remarks about Sophie's Choice and turning lifelong roles into jokes. Audiences watched and rewatched, recognizing the stark contrast between Jimmy Kimmel and Meryl Streep. Jimmy's and the network's weak excuses further eroded public trust. "They're trying to cover up the truth," a social media user noted. Meryl was right. They just want cheap laughs. Meryl Streep's power lay not only in her acting talent, but in the credibility and resolve she had built over decades. The public, though swayed by trends, ultimately valued enduring principles. 2 days after the event, a major online poll by a reputable entertainment news outlet showed 75% of respondents agreed with Meryl Streep's views on art's value and the decline of entertainment shows. This staggering figure highlighted the public's simmering frustration with shallow, meaningless entertainment. Pressure mounted on Jimmy Kimmel and the network. Sponsors expressed concerns. Production partners questioned the show's image. Many of Jimmy's fans turned away, disappointed by his treatment of a legend. More significantly, Meryl's message spread beyond Hollywood, touching every field where true value is overshadowed by superficial glitz. The Meryl Streep-Jimmy Kimmel Live incident wasn't just a fleeting media storm. It became a milestone, a resounding wake-up call echoing across Hollywood and beyond. In the weeks and months that followed, the impact of that moment unfolded, reshaping how the public viewed entertainment and forcing industry insiders to confront an uncomfortable truth. Immediately, the final painting, the film Meryl Streep came to promote, saw an unexpected surge in box office revenue and online views. Not due to typical marketing ploys, but because of Meryl's statement. Audiences flocked to the film with deep curiosity, wanting to experience the true value of art she spoke of. Critics who might have initially reviewed the film objectively, now saw it through a new lens, uncovering deeper meanings Meryl had hinted at. The film's revenue far exceeded expectations and sustained longer than similar genre works. For Jimmy Kimmel, the consequences were severe. The show faced harsh criticism from multiple fronts. Major sponsors began pulling out or cutting ad budgets, citing concerns about brand image and ethical values. Jimmy Kimmel Live's ratings plummeted in the initial weeks, stabilizing later, but never regaining their former highs. Jimmy was forced to issue a public apology on air, though his reluctant tone couldn't mask his embarrassment. The apology failed to fully appease the public, with many finding it insincere. Jimmy's image, once that of a witty, charming host, became a symbol of shallowness and disrespect. But the greatest impact was the shift in industry perception. Talk shows became more cautious about exploiting artists' private lives or turning their performances into amusement. Producers began discussing content value more seriously instead of chasing viral moments. While the change wasn't immediate, and not universally embraced, Meryl's words planted the seed for a necessary dialogue about media and entertainment's responsibility. Other artists, once silent, grew bolder in speaking out to protect privacy and the sanctity of art. The legacy of that moment wasn't just a star walking off a set, it was proof of the power of integrity, and how a resolute individual's voice could shift the landscape. Meryl Streep didn't need gimmicks or grandiose speeches, she needed only truth, credibility, and courage to defend the values she believed in. Her actions reminded everyone that art, at its core, isn't frivolous entertainment, but a profound reflection of life, a medium to connect and inspire. The story of Meryl Streep and Jimmy Kimmel Live starkly reflects a pressing issue in American society today. the obsession with instant entertainment, and the loss of core values. In an era where algorithms dominate content and viral is the ultimate goal, we often find ourselves caught in a cycle of shallowness. As Meryl bluntly criticized turning emotional roles into memes, or asking her to perform Sophie's Choice in Minnie Mouse's voice. This exemplifies how entertainment is cheapened for amusement. This doesn't just happen on TV, but permeates all aspects of life, from prioritizing sensational headlines and short TikTok videos over in-depth analysis, to accepting shallow social media connections, instead of building genuine relationships. Meryl Streep is a powerful reminder of the need for dignity and steadfastness in personal values. She refused to become a spectacle, and bravely confronted a larger system. In modern American life, the pressure to be entertaining, to go viral, is immense. We see this on social media, where people constantly strive for standout content, sometimes sacrificing authenticity or personal values. The advice here is to follow Meryl's example. Know your boundaries, and dare to say no to what diminishes your worth. Don't let external pressures, whether from work, social media or relationships, force you to act against your principles and self-respect. Remember, as Meryl said, our audience is discerning enough to distinguish between artistic value and fleeting entertainment stunts. Likewise, those who truly value you will see and honor your true worth, not superficial performances. If this story of integrity and artistic value resonated with you, subscribe to the channel to join us in continuing the journey to seek and celebrate what's meaningful. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next insightful story.